Then she chose a picture with a plant, and then she suddenly started to get tears in her eyes and cry because she realized that she had been living completely past her own needs. Sometimes such a picture has an enormous impact, even if you don't expect it as a coach. A client once told me, "The best thing you gave me, Miss Messerschmidt, was the picture."
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
Welcome to another episode of the Making of a Coach podcast. I'm Tobi from MetaFox, and you may know MetaFox and me through the Deep Pictures card series, which we launched with MetaFox quite a few years ago. Image cards are a concept that emerged in Germany and in Switzerland, and most of the biggest experts working with those are German speakers. So with this episode today, we are trying a small experiment. My guest, Jasmin Messerschmidt, does not only use image cards in her own work as a coach, but she also researched the topic from both a psychology and neuroscience perspective and wrote her doctoral thesis about it. Of course, she's the kind of expert I really wanted to get on the show to discuss this topic. And even though we recorded the interview in German and also a small demo coaching in German, I still wanted to bring this to you. So today we try a little experiment and embrace the times of AI we are living in. And the upcoming 35-minute conversation between Jasmine and I are transcreated with 11 Labs, an AI-based tool. And I was super impressed what you can do with this and how well this actually works. Nevertheless, if you speak German, you can actually hop one episode further and listen to the German original. But if you're English speaking and you still are curious about coaching with picture cards and also accessing bodily feelings and all these different things, then just give it a chance and listen on. Let's learn from one of the most experienced coaches in the German-speaking market when it comes to picture cards. Let's hear from Jasmin. Let's go.
Well, for me, coaching with images has a lot to do with what is deeper there. And images make it very easy to go through these doors. So images open up, they don't close off, but rather images appeal to emotions and invite the client to engage with them and see what the image does to him or her.
So the curiosity about what lies behind the room was also what led you to work with images and kept you engaged.
Yes, which leader likes to talk about their emotions? Nowadays, maybe more so, but 10, 15 years ago, it was much more difficult. And especially when you had people in coaching who didn't want to open up, couldn't, due to personal experiences or because they were sent to coaching. A client once told me, "The best thing you gave me, Miss Messerschmidt, was the picture." And otherwise, he was very hesitant with emotions and with insights into his inner self. Yes.
Do you have any more examples?
Yes, I have a whole lot of examples. For example, I had a woman in coaching who came to me and wanted to structure her company. She was a managing director and worked 80, 90 hours and wanted to recruit new employees, wanted to develop a campaign. And that's why she came to coaching, and we worked on it for 1 or 2 hours. And then I showed her pictures and said, "Today we'll do something different." And I asked her which picture spoke to her. And then she chose a picture with a plant. And then she suddenly started to get tears in her eyes and to cry. And because she simply realized that she had been living completely past her own needs. And this was suddenly made massively clear to her through this picture.
Mhm.
Yeah, something like that. Or other leaders who are not so with this handling of authority, did not want to use authority or power, had difficulties with it, and were played against the wall by some employees, I remember, who also had a hard time asserting themselves because they couldn't or didn't want to deal with this power. And yes, I worked with a manager who then chose a wolf or a fox, I don't remember, and somehow developed the goal, "Power is in good hands with me." And with that, he was able to lead well. Yes. So images provide access to very deep inner beliefs without having to explicitly identify a belief, but rather, in working with images, one discovers this depth within oneself more easily. And it is very natural.
So I have definitely experienced that, and perhaps many listeners have as well. both in the role of a client and as a coach. And I believe most of us, okay, powerful tool, I can use it very, very versatilely. I will do it from now on. But you didn't just say, okay, powerful tool, I'll use it now and then, but you even wrote your doctoral thesis on the topic of images in coaching. I'll quickly read the title that I noted down here. Your doctoral thesis is The Self in the Picture, an empirical study on the use of visual materials to promote self-reflection and self-change processes in individual coaching. How did it come about that you delved so deeply into this topic?
So it was actually what I just mentioned. It was a person who was sent to coaching and he regularly reprimanded his employees. He really tore them down. If they did not meet the goals or fulfill his expectations, the turnover was correspondingly high. And I worked with him using reflection questions about where this and that comes from and how it can be different, and resource oriented. When was it different before? But all these questions were on the surface. So he didn't really like thinking about himself. And then I worked with him using images, and he chose a bear, I believe. And this image then enabled him to remain calm in conversations with his employees or in crisis situations. In conversations, for example, he would place this image next to him, and whenever he looked at it, it deeply calmed him. And I was really occupied with it, and I'm more of a researcher, so if something interests you, I like to pursue it. And I also found a Professor Dr. Korte from the Technical University of Braunschweig, who supported me in being able to work on this topic in a qualitative form. And then I conducted individual interviews and explored the topic of what happens when a person is presented with a picture and what leads to them actually changing their behavior. Yes, that really goes very deep. Impulse control goes very deep. I can resolve 10 times not to lose my temper or to stay friendly, and we all know that doesn't work. The more you hold yourself together, the more likely it is to break out again. And through the images, I experienced how this effect comes about on the unconscious level. And this why and what the conditioning factors are and whether it is effective and measurable. But in the moment when I think about myself through an image, more comes to mind. I am more relaxed. I am more broadly positioned and true. I also go deeper because this cognition doesn't always interfere.
So the deeper exploration, the bringing to light of personality parts, you say. Based on your findings in the dissertation and now also from your current practice, when would you say it makes the most sense to work with images for certain types of concerns?
So actually, whenever someone comes with diffuse feelings like demotivation, dissatisfaction, those latent things where you don't really know what's going on, like something is there, but what exactly, then it makes sense. So how do I succeed in asserting myself? How do I manage to get through this next difficult time with a good attitude? How do I successfully go through an application process? How do I manage to set boundaries? How do I manage to live healthier, to stress less? So this topic of self-leadership, self-management, which is currently gaining even more importance and significance. For all these processes, I find that working with visual materials is really worth its weight in gold because they simply lead. Coherent development goals are developed, and not only the mind says it's good for you, do it, but also the gut or the emotion says, let's go there now. That is nice or good for us.
Really a door opener when it comes to talking about emotions, and all the people who have a certain reluctance to talk about emotions. I would say in quotes like scientific professions, researchers, engineers, IT, such professional groups for whom it is unfamiliar or unusual. It's just easier to talk about an image. So that accounts for another 20 or 30%, I think, of those where you say, that's an opener, that's fun, that's nice, that's easy, it feels easy. And I work very resource oriented, strength oriented, and images allow such resource strengths to be discovered very quickly.
How do you use an image now when you have a more advanced coaching session here? Suppose I were a fly on the wall in your coaching room, what could I observe?
So you could observe that I initially do not work with images, but rather work out the goals of the coaching, look with scaling at where someone stands in relation to their goals and what are the indicators by which one recognizes the achievement of goals. And often then when I notice someone actually wants to, but they can't manage it. So for example, I currently have a woman in coaching who wants to show herself, who wants to make her strengths visible in the company. She would like to move to the next career level, and simply has difficulties because she likes to let others go first, because she can't shine, doesn't want to shine, you know? So it's a common phenomenon, especially among women who then say, I hold back, I appear modest, and I don't push myself to the forefront, which naturally leads to being overlooked, passed over, and eventually getting frustrated and asking, well, what can I do now? And when we have found various possibilities or situations where that occurs, where she experiences the problem when it's sometimes different, then I might come, say, in the second or third session to the topic of working with images. And then it usually goes, I mostly work according to the Zurich Resource Model, where I ask the client to choose an image that emotionally, personally appeals to her positively, that makes her smile, that she feels drawn to in the sense of this would support me in showing myself. With that, I could present myself so that she finds a goal, an image of where she wants to go, a target image. And I then present her with different images, including the pictures from MetaFox, because they are really very beautifully intense. And also the Zurich Resource Model. And then the client selects 1, 2, 3 images, and we work out the meaning of this image. And this selection of the image is made with positive somatic markers. These are stored bodily sensations that we have accumulated throughout our lives, both positive and negative, and an emotional evaluation system that has evolved in us over time. And these somatic markers make it possible to establish contact with the emotional level. And I try to guide the client to choose the image or images with her feelings and not with her mind. And then in the next step, once she has her image, we work out the meaning of this image for her. What is contained in positive associations? It's about the mind understanding why the gut chose this image. What message is actually in the image? What needs, feelings, desires, longings are contained in it? And it is about, through this transport in positive associations, transfer into language, image into language, that the mind replaces the unconscious or intuition. And from this material, we then gradually extract a kind of motto or guiding principle, which enables this person, this client, to confidently move forward and to show themselves. And I think that's what images enable. So images themselves have no meaning, but in coaching, I find such images create a resonance. And through this resonance, I can explore myself and can then develop from it. What can help me, what attitude can help me develop in my desired direction?
So what I take away here is primarily, you don't necessarily work with images in the very first session, but rather in the third one, when the concern and perhaps also a bit of the target image have already been worked out. Then you said you work mainly or exclusively with positively charged images. So that means images that evoke a positive resonance, create. A topic that I always find particularly exciting and where I would like to delve a little deeper is the question, how do you ensure that the gut brings out the image? You just talked about somatic markers. What does that mean?
So somatic markers is a term coined by Antonio Damasio, the neuroscientist. And he describes that everything we have experienced emotionally in our lives, which was connected with feelings, is stored in our body as a so-called emotional experience treasure. And whenever so it is an unconscious evaluation system that is developed. And we feel it as tension, we feel it as tingling, as inner calm. So it can be something that happens in the body. It can also be something that happens emotionally. And this evaluation system, what is intuitive, meaning it is not conscious to us, guides our behavior in the form of, yeah, that was great. So we enter some situation. It's new, our evolutionary, our emotional experience, then scans the situation we have experienced so far, and then some somatic marker is triggered positively or negatively and responds. And if we pay attention, we can perceive it very well. And this evaluation system controls our behavior in the form of negative somatic markers. Just get away from here. That was nothing, right? For example, when you think of the dentist, the impulse that arises for me, at least, is get away from here. When you're lying on the beach somewhere or having a nice evening with friends, then you experience positive somatic markers in the sense of, oh yes, I want this. This is good for me. And this, the brain tries to create a kind of pleasurable feelings, which is a central need for us. And in coaching, I use these somatic markers with images. And I do it in such a way that I show the client 2 images or mention 2 terms. For example, stress that I say, when I mention the word stress now, what happens in your body? What do you feel? And then usually comes something like stress. And then I say, not a thought, but a body feeling. Where in your body do you feel the word stress? And many say something tightens up, or I feel it in my stomach, or I feel it in my heart, or my throat gets tighter, or something like that. And then I say a positive term, for example, vacation or leisure or relaxation. And then the clients describe their feeling of relaxation. And then they know, or I know, they have access to their emotions, to their somatic markers, and are then able to select the image based on this level of feeling. And then I do a small relaxation exercise, either by saying, what relaxes you in your everyday life? Last week, when you were in the forest, if the client says, walking in the forest, yes, remember, what did you see there? What was to be heard? So that I bring the client a little deeper into the situation of relaxation so that he has access to his emotional level. And then I briefly explain during the image selection that it is important not to analyze the images, but rather to scan them and simply look at them, choosing them with a positive feeling that helps them address their concern.
That's super exciting because you're actually answering the question of how you help a client get into their body during image selection. Earlier, you said you like to use images, especially when dealing with people who are more cognitively strong, right? People from science, and you bring them to their body by prompting them. That means you say, stress, where do you feel that in your body? And now I could say it's somehow a tightness in the chest. And then we compare that with a walk in the forest. I'm lying on the beach. What is in the body now? And that's a kind of calibration exercise you do before selecting the image to bring people into their bodies. And then you invite them to choose the image with the positive feeling they just experienced.
Yes, although it's important that you don't go in with the specific situation, because then the situations get mixed up, but rather that I say with a positive feeling. And, sometimes I also do a body scan for this reason, so that someone gets in touch with themselves. That's important to me. And not in contact with a specific situation, because I have also experienced that I beamed someone into a situation and someone wanted to get exactly this feeling that they have during yoga, but also from the image. And then it's more like a yoga image that helps to do yoga, but not necessarily to solve the problem, right? So that means I try to create relaxation, but not necessarily link it to a specific other situation.
I understand. And that's also an interesting question, this connection between somatic marker. And if I understand you correctly, somatic marker is just a fancy word for body feeling and biographical experiences.
Yes, so a body feeling, exactly. So actually it should be called the somato-emotional marker according to Damasio or Meyer-Storch. As I said, because it's the body, but also the feeling, right? For some, the left foot tingles, for others, something tightens. So when I do this further training here with ZAM for coaches, then I draw a figure, like a stick figure, and then people are supposed to draw in their emotions. And others notice it more here at the head, in the forehead. For others, it's more here. So everyone has their own somatic markers that activate. And you're right, it's a body feeling, right? It's body and feeling.
Okay, and classics, as you say, would be in the head or in the neck, which tenses up, or maybe also, I could imagine, the jaw, the
bladder or the stomach, the belly, the breathing. So it really is, when I then go into this picture of this little figure, it becomes very colorful afterward because everyone feels it somewhere else.
And how is the connection to my biographical experience? So earlier, when you were talking, it sounded to me like you see the body here as a kind of storage that stores these somatic markers due to a particularly emotionally positive or negative experience I had in the past. What role does this play in the coaching situation and in the image selection?
So images address biographical events unconsciously. One could, for example, mention C.G. Jung, who says images are a resonance to something. There is a resonance with images that arises in me, and Verena Kass, I believe, says what touches us concerns us. So what touches me in an image, through the image, I bring it in here. Images enable access to oneself. It's not the image that has meaning, but the resonance that an image creates. And whether these are somatic markers or whether it's through a theory by Bucci or C.G. Jung, I think that's not really important, but it's always an explanation of an effect. Images have an effect. They create an effect, which has to do with people, right? And it's about what exactly in this image speaks to me. What does it tell me about myself, about my inner needs, about values or desires? So I don't focus on what the somatic marker says, but rather what it has to do with me. And the goal is not like with the Rorschach test to interpret the reaction, but rather for the client to give their own meaning to it. that is the essence in coaching, that aha moment when you think, I need that now so I can assert myself. I need the feeling of I can also be friendly. I don't always have to be tough, always as a leader, but I can also be soft. I can also be friendly. Something like that, right? These inner limitations, beliefs that each of us has, they are revealed through images when approached with curiosity and openness.
Yes, and I will try once more to paraphrase this with my process-driven brain and perspective, because what I hear is that my biography, my life shapes me. So that means in my subconscious, I have physically stored my experiences, which then also shape my beliefs. And through images, and perhaps also images in connection with this physical calibration exercise you described earlier, can I bring out what is actually stored in my somatic memory, in my physical memory, and to which I have no cognitive access.
Exact. You know, if you used to only think about it in your head, there's no change possible. But I think it's great how you summarized it. It's such an individual translation process, you know, that you go from the image through a sensation to an association and further to the conscious meaning, that you bring it out and say, what does the image have to do with me? And this resonance of the client to an image, that's what we pursue. And, you know, what could that mean? Or what touches her about this image? Or what attitude, what strength is in it? What longing might be in it? It's such an individual translation process that takes place when you engage with it. And it doesn't matter if it's a digital image, it doesn't matter if it's an inner image. It also doesn't matter whether I go to the museum or it's all, you know, the question is always where does resonance occur and what does this resonance have to do with me now and my biography, right? Or with me as a person.
That means I don't necessarily have to use picture cards from MetaFox, as nice as they are. But, and yet you mentioned this too, right? You once went to a museum with a client. Can you maybe tell us about that? How did that come about?
Yes, yes, she was also a department head in a company, wanted to develop a new strategy or reinvent herself as a leader. Something needed to happen. And she said she needed something really big. That's about how it was. And then I thought about it, and then I went to the museum with her and we looked at large. I went to the museum beforehand, selected pictures, and I didn't just work positively, actually, but what holds you back? Or which position do you not like at all? Or we selected such a large picture has a completely different emotional impact. Yes, that's such a really a projection surface for completely new impulses with sensing and amazement. And then it's so exciting to see how the client engaged in this communication with the picture. So I was actually out of it as a coach, but she was so immersed in that one picture, especially that she discovered it for herself. Yes. So, and it was like this, she had her vision, which was bigger than before. That was what she wanted. And yes, it came out that she embraces the unknown, that she also finds clarity and a safe space in movement.
Very cool. It is, of course, a whole level more elaborate when you and she travel to the museum. But I can imagine that this change in setting, this change of context, also adds value in the coaching setting.
Yes, especially through this size, through this, it's a masterpiece, right? That's why you often feel a bit smaller. And these life themes, I think, are sometimes more present in the museum. So easier, right? Or more clearly noticeable. Exactly. And you only go to the museum once and not every time, but the rest takes place again in my coaching practice.
You have mentioned the Zurich Resource Model by Dr. Meyer-Storch a few times now. We will certainly take another look at it in our demo coaching. In your museum example, you also mentioned that you didn't work only with positive, that is, not only with positively charged images. And if I now look at this question again from my MetaFox perspective, then we have over 20 variants, over 20 different curations of various images. But the bestseller is the World of Emotion set. And what is special about it is that it not only includes positive images, but also consciously represents the full range of emotions, with about 1/3 being negative images. How can a coaching session or a method look like when you apply it?
Yes, so it can, for example, be that one says, where do I want to go? And, you know, what is holding me back? Which feeling is currently in my way? Yes, or if because I want to set boundaries, want to say no, and then I look at what I want to move away from, what do I want to avoid? What fear is behind it that I can't show myself in the presentation? Which belief, when I think I have to be perfect, how does it feel to be perfect? So I can also, you know, go deeper and delve into the emotion But as I said, it depends on the approach. Some say coaching must hurt. I'm totally fine with that. Yes, and others say coaching should empower, and I tend to go in the empowering direction as a coach. But I also know high-level executives who say, I want to be challenged. And so you simply have to delve into the negative emotions. Otherwise, they feel like they're being wrapped in fluff or cotton wool. Yes, so I think it depends on the type, and I think I'm not here to impose my coaching approach on the client, but it's always about what exactly this client, this universe of a client needs to develop further. And if they are negative feelings, then they are negative feelings.
So that means if you feel a blockage that is negatively charged and you want to bring this out, you want to bring this to the table, then you can do it with negatively charged dark images.
Exactly, right? For example, the topic of stress, which is everywhere at the moment, up to, I don't know, panic attacks. So this pressure, this feeling that one can no longer cope with what is happening out there. I recently had a manager who said, how am I supposed to face my employees when I actually feel like crying myself, right? And then, of course, it's disastrous if I only focus on the positive. That wouldn't work at all. I wouldn't have any connection to this person, right? So now let's think of something nice. 3 wishes from a fairy or a miracle question. You can do that, but it doesn't connect. And I find this pacing with the client, like establishing contact when someone is in a negative state, currently has many negative emotions, and the least come into coaching with positive feelings. But because these pain points are just so strong, then it makes sense to acknowledge that there are pain points and not to brush them aside. I think that's also the reason why I only introduce the positive goal in the second or third session, right? Because at the beginning, you still have these negative feelings and impressions, and it's important to address them.
Yes, it would be interesting to have someone from the field of solution focused coaching here for this debate. I recently had some guests, Kirsten Dierolf, who are very strong in this area, and they always quickly focus on what actually works. Okay, there's a bridge, there's a problem, but when is the problem not there? What works, and how can you see that?
Yes, you can do that too, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And if you only have this solution oriented toolkit, then I think you're not doing justice to the client. And I've done a lot of training with Gunther Schmidt, and he also says that the miracle question for someone who can't get out of it is like a slap in the face, because it suggests that you have to. And if someone has no strength at the moment, then they can't. And then it's important to ask, what does this person need most? They need contact, they need connection. And I create that on this level through images, but also through negative images.
So that means the goal is first the recognition of what is and also the acceptance of what is. And from that, a piece arises with which I can then, so to speak, return to solution orientation.
Exactly. So I need the feeling that with the coach, I can be who I am. And that includes, I think, that I connect to the client's system emotionally. And surprisingly, this works quite well through images, finding a common emotional level, also through working with images.
And how do you then bring the client, after this process of recognition and acceptance is completed, back to solution orientation, to the target image, to the vision? Is that then with further images, or how could that look?
That is very individually different. So I almost always work with images only once in coaching, with inner images, with outer images, once or twice in a coaching process. And this image does indeed come up again and again when we have worked with images, it accompanies it, right? What would this image say now? Or immerse yourself in this image again with the emotions. What would this, what is the connection to the current situation?
So that means the image keeps appearing, at least the positively charged image keeps appearing. And the negatively charged image, I can imagine I might want to let go of, or even leave behind with you, and the positive poses. Connect with me. Or that the negative, I throw that in a trash can. Do you also use such metaphors?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can burn this image. You can make a ritual out of it. You can especially say in the evaluation of the coaching process, that's where we started. Where are we now? Over in the transition, it's about what instead, if not that anymore, where should it go then? And then I try to encourage the client to develop an inner target image, a video of what if you were to shoot a video of the desired future now, what would this video look like? How would you behave? Who else would be there? How would you experience it? What would be the greatest benefit? So those are solution focused questions that I use to guide someone towards their positive goal image. But if that doesn't work, yes, because someone is so stuck in their state, then I have to look step by step
Sometimes I also work with the scaling method, or what are the specific situations, which situations could we now design differently? I once had a client who was really depressed and had burnout and couldn't go on. And normally, although I am a psychologist and psychological practitioner, I am not a trained therapist. And he didn't find any doctor, any clinic, and so on. And I stabilized him a bit. And I had him, and in the first session, I actually had him choose pictures. Then he chose a lion. I would have guessed anything but a lion for him. And he spent a year. We then worked for 2, 3, 4 hours until he was with a therapist. And a year later, he called me and said, "Mrs. Messerschmidt, do you remember me? I'm the one who had the lion as a picture." And he was doing better again. And there too, sometimes such an image can have an enormously strengthening effect. Yes, even if you don't suspect it as a coach, right? I wouldn't have bet on saying there's an image and it strengthens him, but it had such power.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. I think that's a wonderful story to maybe take a short break here. And then I'm super curious to look specifically into practice with the small demo coaching. And here we end with a nice cliffhanger and Jasmine's story about the impact of images, even in the psychosocial and mental health field. Although I have been working with images for many years myself, I have learned a lot, especially regarding the question, and this has always been the hardest for me as a client when working with images. How can I arrive in my own body and feel how stress or perhaps freedom, whatever I see in an image, truly feels for me? The calibration exercise that Jasmine uses here is based on the Zurich Resource Model, abbreviated as ZRM, which we will of course also link for you in the show notes. Additionally, we will link the Deep Pictures card series for you, specifically the World of Emotions set, which we also talked about today, as well as our icebreaker.online card tool for online use. How Jasmine proceeds specifically in her coaching with images, you and all of us can experience together in the next episode. Because there, Jasmine will coach me authentically on my challenge, overwhelm, and attitude as an entrepreneur with many projects. That will be here in 2 weeks. If you enjoyed it today, feel free to leave a review on your trusted podcast platform and/or send the episode to a friend or colleague. Thank you very much. That's it for today. I'm Tobi from MetaFox. All the best and see you next time.